We do have everyone muted other than the two of us, and we're hoping if people have questions, they could send them to us in the Q&A section. We can start with maybe an overview. We received a couple questions from customers when they received an Aeris email, and they were Reese customers, and they didn't understand the association with Reese, and we realized we should explain that and what we've been up to. Restarted the Aeris project, must have been almost 12 years ago. And it's been a very fun journey, a labor of love for sure. And basically, its genesis comes from our love of Caracante, Nebbiolo, and Nerello Mascalese, and our belief that they are a fantastic fit for California that we think people will come to really appreciate. It took a long time. It took a long time to get the grapevines and put them through UC Davis Foundation Plant Services so that we could grow Caracante and Nerello Mascalese. We had to find the right site, and we have a lot of experience with that, given our development of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay sites. And we found a pretty perfect match from a climate standpoint. Obviously not the kind of rich volcanic soils that you have on Etna or the marl of Barolo, but the type of site where we see all the characteristics of that bring a very complex wine to the glass. So our Centennial Mountain site is almost 2,000 feet high. It's about 15 miles from the Sonoma coast, the ocean. And the combination of that altitude and cooling gives it a climate that is very similar to Italy. And that's very uncommon in California. It's a very, very small percent of California that has the sort of warm night that's very important for Italian varietals to ripen properly, and the cooler day. In technical jargon, Italian climates, they're fairly consistent from top to bottom of the country, have a very small diurnal, which is diurnal is a fancy word for the difference between daytime temperatures and nighttime temperatures. But without finding that, Italian grapes don't ripen properly. They will retain too much acid, or the tannins won't ripen properly. Or it gets, if it's too hot, for example, burn off a lot of the complexity. So we had to find a site that really matched that well, and we did. We instrumented it for a couple of years and recorded it, and we have weather stations on Etna as well. That's the other side of the story. We have 2 small vineyards on the Etna volcano in Sicily. Each is in the prime spot for their varietal. So in Sicily, the best Caracante, in fact, almost the only Caracante until recent times, was grown on the eastern slope of the volcano, which is actually the coolest part of the volcano. That is because of a cloud shadow that the prevailing wind moves from west to east there and creates sort of a cloud shadow and a much cooler area. It's also 1,000 meters high, which provides a great deal of cooling as well. So that's where Etna Bianco Superiore can be labeled, Caracante from that area can be labeled Etna Bianco Superiore. It's a very small area around the small town of Milo. And we were very fortunate to partner with Salvo Foti, who made the first real revelatory Caracantes, certainly that I tasted, and I think for modern times, what has drawn so much attention to Caracante. He made those on the town of Milo, and he says the best part is from the church and up. So, and he is the one who found our vineyard. In fact, we each bought, we bought a parcel and split it in half. He has half for his estate vineyard, and we have half for ours. The best area for Nerello Mascalese is the northern slope of the volcano, which is very warm. And Monteguardia, where our vineyard there is located, is prime Nerello Mascalese territory, and in fact came with 2 acres of 100-year-old vines, which is a release we'll make this fall. It's called Centenari. Very excited about that. A lot of people have asked us, when are we going to start releasing more red wine? And no one wants to release more red wine more than we do. But we also have waited. We want to have proper bottle age. We know that we're going to get one chance to make a first impression, and we really want to nail those releases. So it's taking a little while. We're aging our 2018 Nebbiolo, which is obviously sort of the king red of our program, from Centennial Mountain. We are waiting for the first release of Nerello Mascalese, which we think will be 2019. We had some learning, tremendous learning with the project. I mean, everything is different about what we do with Aeris versus what we do with Reese, other than sort of good, solid farming, very strict organic fundamentals. But the pruning, the planting, these things are dramatically different, as is the winemaking. And to be honest, it's taken us a couple of years to nail that for our site and really understand it. There's some interpretation that is always required and just a learning curve. So we think we're getting there, and when we're extremely excited about the wines, we're going to release those first Nerello Mascalese, Nebbiolo, which are coming. We're also going to release a vineyard designated Carricante. So I know it's a little bit confusing, but one of the things that we wanted to explain tonight is that the Bianco is also 100% Carricante, and obviously the Carricante is 100% Carricante. So far from Centennial Mountain, we've only released the Bianco, and this is the second release. This is the differentiation is not by varietal, but it's more about what we're trying to achieve with the wine. The Bianco is meant to be a ready to drink upon arrival. Not that it won't age, it will. It's got terrific structure. It's just going to be more open, more forward. The Carricante has more structure, more complexity. It's unwind slowly in bottle. It's the one that we see as analogous to the Etna Bianco Superiore that we sell from Sicily. So that's the distinction. We'll have 3 whites in the program, 2 from Centennial Mountain and 1 from Sicily. In this release, we also have a Barbera, which I know a lot of our customers may not have tasted Barbera. Barbera is an interesting varietal in that where it's grown, it almost never gets the prime exposure. It's grown side by side with Nebbiolo, and because Nebbiolo is the wine that sells, the great red wine, it gets almost all of the prime southern, eastern, and southwestern exposures in the undulating hills of the Langhe. And Barolo often gets northern slopes. So it's a very adaptable varietal to its situation. But in the cases where it's given a prime exposure, such as with Cavallotto or Roberto Conterno's Cascina Francia, Barbera can excel. And so we wanted to give it a great exposure. We do use it a little bit for blending with the Bricco Rosso, and in years where we think it's terrific, we're going to release a varietal Barbera, and this 2018 we really think is terrific. A lot of people have tried it, and it goes down very fast. It's a delicious wine. Still has a lot of complexity, and hope you give it a try. There's not a lot of it made. Jeff, you want to talk about the Bricco Rosso?
Sure. Yeah, the idea with the Bricco Rosso, we had a lot of discussions kind of early on about making a blended red wine and how we would go about doing that. And one thing that we kind of grabbed onto pretty early was we wanted a red blend that wasn't necessarily varietal, but it really showed the character of the site. We wanted that Centennial Mountain site to come through, and we think it's a pretty singular site. It's a really shallow, rocky, mostly schist soil, and it provides these really intense aromatic, mineral red wines we're starting to learn. So, we started looking at these different blends and trying to find combinations that worked. And the thing that we landed on and we've stuck with is a blend that's really about 50% Nebbiolo. And that Nebbiolo is going to bring you sort of classic Nebbiolo things. It's going to be floral, it's going to be high tone red fruit, really elegant, good structure. But then we blend in, Nerello Mascalese at a fairly high percentage, which is going to bring, sort of a different style of red fruit. But then when we start looking at things like Carignan, which is part of that blend, and Barbera and Primitivo, these are typically darker fruited wines that tend to have more texture and concentration, mid-palate concentration to them. So by putting those all together, I think what we've come up with is a wine that shows kind of the best of all of those different varieties. So you get these high tone, elegant red fruited wines, but they've got structure and they've got some power and some depth. And the concept is to make a wine there that we'll drink early, like the Bianco. You can drink it when you get it, but it has the structure that's native to these Italian varieties that's going to give it, a fairly long life all the way through. So it's something that we are actually really proud of, and we see it as a flagship wine for us. The Brico Rosso will be something that we intend to make every year, and we evaluate those percentages every year, but we seem to be falling into a really nice pattern of having about half Nebbiolo, and then the other red varieties are going to make up the rest, depending on the vintage and how they show through the vintage. So it's an interesting concept of mixing, that you don't see anywhere else in the world. And it's something that we really look forward to making that wine every year, because it's sort of it's a surprise for us every year how that wine looks. And we're really proud of the 18, and we've just recently done the 19 and similar percentages, and also really proud of that as well. So,
it's one of the great things about making that is it's developed a different side of winemaking for us, because obviously in our very Burgundian approach to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, we're focused on very singular site expression, and obviously monovarietal. The idea of blending in Burgundy would it's definitely anathema to everything, but we think we can, through this blend, actually have a singular site expression. It's just the varietal is not singular in that sense. And with Nebbiolo as a 50% component, we fully realize that many of our customers will not be Nebbiolo drinkers. Pinot Noir has softer tannins. Personally, I absolutely love the tannic structure of Nebbiolo, but by blending, we can buffer that a little bit, and it won't require the same age as the Nebbiolo wine to be approachable, but it will be extremely age-worthy as well. I think with that, maybe we should open it up. If there are questions, please send them on the Q&A panel, and we will, I think we had one sent earlier, which is, will we release a varietal Nerello Mascalese? The answer is absolutely. That will be a long-term mainstay for us. The first potential vintage is 2019. Sadly, 2020 is a complete wipeout for Aeris. We lost the entire crop to smoke. Reese lost about 80% of its crop to smoke. So that's going to delay us yet again in getting the wines out that we would like to. But we've learned a lot about Nerello Mascalese. I think we're right in the place we want to be in making it now. This has to do with pruning, all the care. These are head trained vines. It's a system called we've planted all of the vineyards in their traditional style and method, and because those have been honed over centuries for what works best with those varieties. And that means for the Sicilian varieties, they are what's called albarello trained, which is a little tree. It's not the same thing as like a Zinfandel goblet. It's more of a stalk training system, but these are not trellised grapes. They don't look anything like all of the rest of the vines planted in California. These are small little tree head trained vines. And it's really funny when you think of white wine made from something like that. I think that's very unique for people, but that is Salvo told us that, that's not only traditional, but the best, all the best quality has come from those plantings in Sicily. And then with Nebbiolo, we plant them almost identically to the lawn.
Got some good questions coming in.
Yeah, we've got, yes. Are all the varieties in the blend from the same property, Carignan and Primitivo too? Yes, absolutely. They're all grown on Centennial Mountain. We have the Carignan is also grown on Etna alongside Nerello Mascalese, and it's called Nerello Cappuccio. The Nerello Cappuccio was thought to maybe be a different variety, but it's not. It is Carignan, and we have planted it as well for the same reasons that they do there. It's a very nice complement to Nerello Mascalese as and it's in very small quantities, typically in Nerello Mascalese there. The Zinfandel, we've also planted Zinfandel and Primitivo, and as well as using them in the blend, we will release a varietal Zinfandel, and we have a terrific one in 2019 that we're going to kick that off with. So stay tuned. Our style of Zinfandel, as you might imagine, is not the massive Zinfandel. We try and aim for beautiful balance, but still have that delicious Zinberry spicy. The site is just so spicy and mineral that really helps. And the climate actually really brings a terrific balance at relatively low alcohols for all the Italian varieties, including Zinfandel. Another question: what is the aging window for the Rosso? Gosh, it's long. I mean, I drink the Rosso now. I do also, I've been accused of drinking young Barolo and Barbaresco, but it's approachable now. It will age for decades. If I put a number on how many decades, I think I'd be speculating a little too much, but I think people familiar with age-worthy wine, when they taste that, I say, oh yeah, that's going to age quite a while. Jeff, you want to answer the type of vessels question?
Sure. So the question is, what type of vessels are the reds fermented and aged in? Any whole cluster, co-fermentation, or each variety done separately? So one at a time through there. Maybe chronologically would make more sense. So typically what we age in is a combination of 1-ton stainless, and those are the tanks that we use, for Pinot Noir under the Aeris moniker. We also use them for some of the varieties there, especially Nebbiolo, as we try to learn. The thing to remember is that we have a lot of, just like Aeris, we have a lot of very small parcels, small blocks that are dedicated to either different biotypes or different things that we're trying to basically test out for Nebbiolo. So to track those, we're doing those predominantly in small tanks, 1-ton stainless steel ferment. But some of the other varieties we're doing in predominantly 2-ton oak uprights. So Nerello Mascalese has done quite a bit in 2-ton oak uprights. We did Zinfandel in 2-ton oak uprights. So it really depends on the variety, and it depends on what we're trying to accomplish and the things that we're still trying to learn about these particular varieties. As far as aging goes, it's really a combination of used 60-gallon barrels and then a lot of cask. We're using predominantly 10 hectoliter, which is 1,000 liter, and 2,500 liter cask. And pretty much exclusively, Nebbiolo is done that way. Nerello Mascalese is done in a combination of the two. For the Zinfandel and the Barbera, we're doing mostly 60-gallon, but often when we put the blends together, they then go to cask. So it's really a combination of all of those things, but it's sort of hewing close to the traditional methods of making those wines. There's no co-fermentation except for Mascalese. We do a tiny bit of Carignan or Cappuccio, which is also traditional on Etna Rosso. They would do a small 5 or 10% co-ferment. And that's because of the color of Mascalese. It needs just that little bit of a hit that really helps it out. It can be a little unstable, which is one of the peculiarities of Mascalese that we've learned. But other than that, everything's fermented 100% varietal. And so far, no whole cluster, although we've talked about it. And I think, we need to figure out the basics on these things first. And once we get everything kind of lined up and tackled and that, I see us maybe looking at a little bit of whole cluster going forward. Moscalese actually, and Salvafotti on Etna does often do a little bit of whole cluster, maybe only 10 or 15%, something like that, but it is something that is fairly common. Nebbiolo, we haven't been that bold yet, but I think that's something that we would like to try at some point.
It might be coming soon.
Might be coming real soon, I'd like to say.
Yeah. The one thing also is to talk about Caracante and how different the Caracante winemaking is. We with Chardonnay, we whole cluster press without destemming. Just take all the grapes. We press very gently. We go to small barrels, about 15% new, very lightly toasted for the new barrels. Mostly 85% are going to be neutral. That fermentation is going to happen in those barrels. We're very non-interventionist. We do know what's called batonnage in Burgundy. They will often stir the barrels even after the fermentation to keep the lees suspended, which has a way of bringing out the fruit and softening some of the acidity. And we do not do that with any of our Aeris Chardonnay because we feel like we have enough fruit and power, and so we don't. But with Caracante, we make it quite differently. We use the same large casks. These are huge casks against the wall, old wood. We're reaching the point where they can be used. Obviously, I have to start with some new ones, but the Caracante is made in those huge casks, and we've actually modified them a bit to have some cooling capability, just so we can have a lower temperature for fermentation, which we think really emphasizes the precision, the florals, the minerality, and we do use batonnage. Caracante is a fascinating varietal because it is very low in alcohol, even in a warm climate. So we haven't really talked too much about this, but these Caracante wines we're selling, the Bianco and the Caracante, are about 11.8% alcohol. So quite low, with terrific acidity, great flesh, great complexity, and terroir presentation. But those are the main ways in which we make the Caracante different as well. We have a question. So are you still selling Caracante from Sicily? I haven't been offered any since 2014, which I loved. Yes, and we must have somehow crossed our lines on the 2016, which was offered last year. The 2016 actually got, Ian DeGatta mentioned it as the best white wine of Italy for the vintage, which was very exciting. He's incredibly knowledgeable wine writer of the wines of Italy. The next release will be this fall of the 2017 Etna Bianco Superiore, which received a terrific write-up today from Venice, and the first ever of Centenari, where these 100-year-old vines, we had been somewhat neglected. We nursed them back to life, or I should say Salvo did. And we then have now started making a great red wine from there. It's predominantly Nerello Moscalese. One thing about Sicily that's very different is that vines are almost never a single variety in a vineyard. It's, in fact, in old times it was unheard of. So there are always other things thrown in, and it could be the Capuccio, the Carignan. It could be a little bit of Grenache. There are varieties that we have found there that have no name. We asked what was this one called? Is it Franchi or something like that? So there's bits of many varieties. And to touch upon that, that related to Caracante, that's a really interesting discussion. Etna Bianco Superiore requires 80% Caracante. That is predominantly what's grown around Milo, but in the rest of Etna, Caracante is very rare. In fact, almost none was planted back when we started. There have been some new plantings. There's a little bit of marketing going on of wines that are predominantly going to be Colorado or Manila, which are table wine grapes and not nearly as sophisticated as Caracante. So not all Etna Biancos have any meaningful amount of Caracante. And if you really want to taste Caracante, you've got to stick with Etna Bianco Superiore. Or there are some new vineyards that are more Caracante now, and you could look at those. But it thrives best in the Etna Bianco Superiore area.
Kevin, I've got some photos of the Centenari in the field. If you're interested, I can bring that up.
Yeah, great. Let's do that.
Okay.
Another question. So how do you get the Sicilian here? Bring in grapes, juice barrels. We bring in finished wine in bottles, and it's shipped in a refrigerated container.
Give me 1 second here, and I'll have this up. Oh, and Maureen had a follow-up question there too.
I have no open questions on mine right now.
Oh. It was asking, so Maureen's question, I'll answer that real quick. Maureen's question was about how do we do the Sicilian, then are we bringing over grapes or juice, or we actually make the wines there, Maureen. That's the partnership with Salvo Foti. So when we bought these two parcels that were adjacent to each other, the reason that Salvo, one of the reasons why he chose that site was there was an old Palmento, which is the old family wineries that were so ubiquitous on the volcano. And he wanted to restore that and make that his new home winery. And so now he and his son have essentially hand built and restored this entire winery, and the wines are being made there. So Salvo Farms, the grapes are just across the street, our Caracantes, and he makes the wines there, bottles them there, and then we send them over. We import them as unlabeled bottles, and then we label them here once they get over the ocean.
And here's a question. Is anyone in Sicily fermenting, aging in clay amphora? Is that something you've considered for any of the wines from Centennial Mountain? The answer is yes, absolutely. In fact, Salvo makes a Nerello Mascalese that he makes it in a clay amphora, and I really like it. So that might be something that we try at some point, but we have not done that to date.
And you should have a picture there of the Centenari, the 100-year-old Mascalese vines.
Yeah, these vines can tell a story. There are so many holes and knots and cohabitation with other animal life. It's amazing. It was really fun to restore this, and you can see the wooden stakes, the spacing, probably right about 4 feet by 4 feet. And that was the fashion, and it's really been planted that way since Roman days. With that configuration, you can actually till in 2 directions and cultivate all the land around the grape. There's no sort of under the row hoeing issue like we have with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And you'll see some leaves stripped away there to get a little air near the clusters, and then the canes are tied. I can't quite see that here. They're tied vertically to sort of keep them from drooping too much and allowing the sun in. I don't know if we have more questions. Please send them to us. In the meantime, Jeff, maybe if you want to pull up the cask, people get an idea of the difference between, sort of Burgundian barrels and the more traditional Italian casks that we're using.
Sure thing. Yeah, give me just 1 second here.
There you go. You want to talk about how you've ordered those, Jeff, and seasoned and used them?
Yeah, so to talk a little bit about these casks, these are something that are really a complete custom job, top to bottom, that are really designed and then constructed around the way that we make wine. As Kevin mentioned, these are all temperature controllable, which is a fairly unique thing in cask aging, because we wanted the ability to ferment cool and not be left to sort of the whims of what the ambient temperature is. And so what you're seeing here is the rounds on the left. The small ones are 10 hectoliter, 1,000 liter, and the ovals are 25. And these are actually made in France by a Burgundian cooper out of French oak. We've trialed several different types of oak, several different origins of oak, and we've used several different producers, and these are the ones that we've liked the best. So what we tend to do is we will ferment, or we'll age a little bit of, say, Chardonnay in these to season them just a little bit. And you can actually see on the second from the left, under the Aeris, it says CHBW. So we'll put a little bit of Chardonnay through to season them like you would a barrel. And then we're ready to move in with things like Caricante and Nebbiolo. So what you're seeing here is about, maybe 2/3 of the total amount of casks. We actually have quite a few. And we will be aging in the large ones through here, mostly Caricante and Nebbiolo. The small ones are things like Nerello Mascalese or Barbera, or potentially Zinfandel as well. So, it's a continual process of seasoning and then using and then seasoning and using as we acquire more casks. At this point now, we're sort of at a steady state where we have the amount of casks that we need going forward, more than likely, and they're all basically been seasoned at this point. So, but they make for a very different aging profile than, say, a 60-gallon barrel, where you can do a 2 or 3 year aging, and it's really minimal impact from the wood itself, but you allow these structured Italian varieties to really age slowly and kind of mellow. So we're really beholden to using cask. There's a reason they were done traditionally, and they really do, as in our short experience, make for better wines when we look at some of these traditional varieties, red and white.
It's probably worth pointing out, we started using casks for our Syrah many years ago, and there's just certain varieties that we don't really like to see any sign of oak, and Nebbiolo is high on the list. So we're very traditional in that sense. Although I don't think we're totally dogmatic, isn't it? We do vary it by varietal. So those large casks are meant to have the micro oxygenation for the resolution of tannins during aging, but really, given the difference surface area to volume ratio, they don't, the wine doesn't come in contact with as much oak, and therefore very, very minimal oak flavor is transferred to the wine. Someone asked, what were the wines used for previously? I'm sure that's regarding the Centenari. Was anyone else using the fruit? The answer is yes, but things are a lot of Sicilian wine is made by the people in their backyard for home use. There's not really that same sort of famous vineyard. It's a fascinating region in that it was used primarily for bulk wine, but there were it was a massive amount of wine was grown on Etna around the turn of the 1900s. So there was a tremendous amount of grapevines planted on the volcano, and yet there wasn't the market shaping of, well, here's your best and here's your worst wine, as there was, say, in Burgundy or Bordeaux. There are obviously vineyards that are much better than others. I mean, one of the distinctions that was very clear to the local population was that the best white wine always came from Milo, and that's why it has that Etna Bianco Superiore designation. So I think there's another question here. As you continue to develop what you are growing and making on Centennial Mountain, is the long-term plan to also keep making wine from Sicily? The answer is yes. The only caveat being, I do realize it's a little confusing what we're doing. but it's great for us to have these sort of benchmark examples that we're involved in, that we're learning from, and to offer to customers. And hopefully customers will appreciate that. We've had a lot of interest in the Etna Bianco Superior from Europeans. Caracante has become quite the rage in the last 20 years. And everyone in Sicily wants to get some Etna Bianco Superior as well. If you can tell us, please, Jeff Felipe, certainly recognize that name. Tell us if you think it's too confusing. Obviously, our passion and what we do every day is grow Centennial Mountain and produce that. So clearly that is the core of our effort. But with one white and one red offerings from Sicily, maybe that makes it more interesting to people as well. They can see what the sort of benchmark examples are from the home of these varietals, and then see what California's expression, how it differs. We already see that. I think we're getting a good idea of how our site expresses. Probably have the best grip on Caracante so far, and it's not exactly the same as Etna Bianco Superiore. Certainly, it has its own unique profile, which I think is terrific. Our Centennial Mountain Caracante is much more floral, for example. And I would say that Etna Bianco Superior is a little richer in a sense, with more of a beeswaxy character. They both have this sort of great, I would say maybe Etna Bianco Superior is a little more saline, and our Centennial Mountain would be maybe a little more freshwater mineral in character. And maybe we'll wrap it up, if there are more questions, certainly send them. But one thing I think we should probably clarify is what is coming from Aeris and when. So this is a release of this year's Centennial Mountain production. There are a couple of 2018s we're holding back. Nebbiolo and Caracante, we're going to give one more year of bottle age before we offer them next year. So next year we'll offer a 2019 Bianco and a 2018 Caracante. So we'll have two whites from Centennial Mountain. The Nebbiolo, hopefully our first, will be one more year of bottle age. What we plan to then head toward with the release of the two Sicilian wines in the fall, each year have two releases, one focused on the Centennial Mountain production and one focused on the Sicilian production. And you'll see the Centennial Mountain list grow. So next year, for example, with the addition of the Caracante and the Nebbiolo, then and the Zinfandel. And then after that, we'll have a Nerello Mascalese. And that's all we have planned. So we should reach a steady state. Obviously, the great crop loss of 2020 puts a big gap in our production. But that's where we will be ultimately. That will be the array of wines that we offer. Looks like there are no more questions, so we just like to thank everyone for attending. Hope you found it as interesting as we do. Oh, well, we got one last question. I'll add this, but I may have missed it. We can talk about what clones are used for California grapes. Any fun story like Reese's Provenance? There are many, but we don't talk about them publicly too much. But basically, with Reese, we always focus on, we try to find plant material that is old and has been producing great quality, that is not sort of perfectly clean. In Pinot, there was a big push for Dijon clones and all these cleaned up clones where they eliminate all the virus. It sounds like a good thing, but it actually eliminates most of the quality as well. That's not really what we're interested in. We put together a great array of suitcase and heritage clones for Pinot Noir. And a great example why this cleaning up of grapevine thing is not beneficial to quality is in Chardonnay, where the field selection of Chardonnay that we use has been in California for more than 100 years, I think. The Wente is thought to be older than that, but and it's a field selection now. It's very diverse. It's mutated. There's a lot of variety in there. Produces the best Chardonnay. It's got tiny little berries. They took that, they wiped all the virus out of it, and made probably the most insipid jug wine clone of Chardonnay. It's called Clone 4. No resemblance in grapes, vines, or quality in the glass. So that's a quick answer. And I'll just make this the last question. Morning says, Kevin, are you still drinking red Burgundy? Absolutely. All the time. But I do have a real love for Italian wine as well. And that has helped spawn this project. And Jeff does as well. So thank you again, everyone. Thanks for attending. If you have any extra questions or anything that comes up, please email us. And this Zoom way of communicating with our customers is really fun. We're going to expand this, and we'll do another one next month when we release Reese sparkling wine. I'll save everything to say about that till next month. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.